am Redeemer and Master Ministries. I am Redeemer and Master Ministries.
Tulad ng nasabi ko, masaya kami na naririto kayo. In fact, you are a blessing to us, okay? And the blessings in Blessing Christian Fellowship won't be complete without you. Yan, pwede mo bang sabihin sa katabi mo yon? Pero mahaba no? The blessings, or the blessing in Blessings Christian Fellowship won't be complete without you. Tingnan natin kung gaano kayo kagaling tumanda. Sige nga, say it to your seatmates. Go. The blessing in Blessings Christian Fellowship won't be complete without you. All right, so, speaking of blessings, kagabi ho nagkaroon ng informal na survey, of course sa tulong ni Ate Danica, ng aking asawa. So we conducted an informal survey, and the question was, what is the most valuable thing that you own? So meron ho kaming na-collect na 52 responses. So we did this on the BCF Family GC or group chat, okay? So that was a question. Ano ang pinakamahalagang bagay na pagmamay-ari mo? Of course, we were already anticipating na baka may sumagot dyan ng relasyon sa Panginoon, pag-ibig sa Diyos. So, pinangunahan na namin at sinabihan na namin sila na maliban sa pagmamahal o relasyon mo sa Panginoon, ano yung most valuable thing that you own, all right? And I'm very excited to share with you a summary of the results, all right? So ito po yun. These were the responses. So meron ho diyang award, merong time, merong K-drama, may sumagot pa na K-drama daw yung pinaka-importante, meron nagsabi ng dangal o puri, merong nagsabi ng pet. But I want you to pay more attention to the top 4, okay? So hindi ko alam kung nakikita siya. So top 4 is money. 10% ho ng mga sumagot. So about 5 of them said na ang pinakamahalagang pag-aari nila ay ang pera. Sino sa inyo ang nakaka-identify dito? Pera ang pinakamahalaga. Okay, wala akong masama naman doon. Pera in and of itself is not evil, okay? It's the love of money, that's really the root of all evil. Now, sa top 3, kalusugan naman. So 15%. 8 people said na ang pinakamahalagang pagmamay-ari nila ay kalusugan. Sino sa inyo ang nag-agree? Okay, kalusugan. Kasi nga naman, kahit gaano mo kadaming pera, kung ang dami-dami ng bawal kainin, di ba parang hirap nun eh. Kaya mong kumain sa buffet, pero wala kang makain dahil you're not healthy enough. You see how miserable life can be, without good health. And then at top 2, material possessions. So probably ito ho yung mga tipong meron kang kondo, meron kang bahay, meron kang kotse, perhaps meron kang gadget. So ito yung mga material possessions, and at least 12 people out of 52 said that material possessions ang pinakamahalaga or the most important thing that they own. And lastly, but definitely not the least, ang top 1 ho ay ang family. Okay? So as if to say na mawala na lahat, masawag lang yung pamilya. Because family first. Kaya nga ang pangalan natin ay Blessings Christian Family. Hindi, fellowship yun. Pero family daw, 16 ang nagsabi na family ang pinaka-importante. Now, when you think about it, I don't know if you could see all the items from where you are sitting, pero lahat ho ng items na ito, as much as they are very important, the fact of the matter is, all of these things can be stolen from us. All of these things can be gone in just a second. Even when you think about your health, pwede ho yung, di ba, meron kayong mga kakilala dito na ang healthy. Last week lang, nag-jogging pa. Last week lang, nag-basketball pa. Tapos kaninang umaga, inatake na sa puso. So you see, in just a snap of a finger, that health, which you consider one of the most important things you own, can be gone. Alright? The same thing goes with wisdom. Maraming tao nagsasabi na kapag matalino ka, kapag may pinag-aralan ka, hindi yun maaagaw sa'yo. Well, hindi pa ba kayo nakakilala ng isang tao na nagkaroon ho ng injury. Or let's say, hindi man injury, na-depress, dahil sa love life. Tapos simula nun, hindi na kumain, hindi na lumabas, nawala na sa sarili. May kakilala akong ganun, yung tipong, hindi nga, dati engineer yan, bakit ngayon parang taong grasa na? So you see, even your wisdom, wag na nga lang tayong lumayo, meron nga dito, parang ang talino, ang taas ng pinag-aralan, pero pag na-in love na, nawawala lahat ng pinag-aralan, nakakalimutan lahat ng tama. So you see, even wisdom can be stolen. And your family members, ngayon nakikita nyo yan, masasaya kayo, pero darating yung panahon, yung mga anak nyo may kukuha niyang ibang lalaki, ibang babae. Hindi naman yun nangunguha ng bata, pero siyempre pag nag-asawa na yan, may sariling pamilya, or hindi man yun, yung mga magulang natin na mahal natin, every time we look at them, we're happy, there will come a time when even they will be gone. So the point na sinasabi ko ho dito is that walang anumang bagay na iniisip nating pagmamay-ari natin ang talagang sa atin. Because anything that can be gone or anything that can be stolen away from you is something that you never truly own. In fact, as we venture into our brand new series, if there's one thing that I want everybody to realize about him or herself, it's the fact that we are all owners of nothing. Wala ho tayong pagmamayari. On the contrary, we are stewards of everything. Can you say steward? Diba? Pag steward ang sinasabi, anong pumapasok sa utak nyo? Stewardess. Diba? Yung mga gusto maging flight attendant. Ang ibig sabihin ho ng steward ay isang katiwala. Okay? So, wala ho tayong pagmamayari, pero tayo ho ay katiwala ng lahat ng bagay na mayroon tayo. Kasama ang ating pamilya, kasama ang ating pera, kahit gaano kakonti yan, kasama ang ating health, kasama ang lahat-lahat ng bagay that we consider our own. In reality, we are owners of nothing, we are stewards of everything, at ito hong prinsipyo or katotohanan na to, ang mas lalo pa ho nating aalamin, in the next 4 Sundays, including today. At ang title ho ng ating series, I know that this was already introduced to you last Sunday, is Stewardship from Owner to Caretaker. Tayo ho ay hindi owner, tayo ay caretaker lamang. Now, since we're talking about stewardship, I think it's just, it's just timely that we refer to what the dictionary has to say about this, or how the dictionary defines stewardship. Ang sabi ho dito sa Merriam-Webster, it is the careful and responsible. So those are the two adjectives. You cannot be a steward without being careful. Dapat maingat ka dahil nga ikaw ang katiwala. Dapat din responsable ka sa pag-manage ng anumang bagay that is entrusted to you. And look at the last phrase. Ang sabi dito, especially the managing of another's property, meaning another person's property. So kapag tinignan mo na ang sarili mo na isang katiwala lamang, it goes to also say na ibig sabihin, yung pinagkatiwala sa'yo belongs to someone else. Now, as Christians, ang atin hong pinapaniwalaan, which has a very strong biblical ground, is that lahat ng bagay na meron tayo ay hindi sa atin. Ito ay pinagkatiwala lamang ng Diyos sa atin. And it's gonna be up to us how faithful we would be. Pero syempre, as far as you and me are concerned, what we wanna learn more of is what we call faithful stewardship. Pinag-uusapan ho natin yung stewardship, but it's not enough that you are a steward. Ang kinakailangan ho natin from a biblical standpoint, and for us to be able to glorify the Lord, of course by His grace still, is to be faithful stewards. Not just ordinary stewards, but faithful stewards. Sino sa inyo dito yung pinagkatiwala nyo na ng isang araw or ilang oras ang inyong anak sa ibang tao? Na-experience nyo na yun. Dahil sobrang busy nyo, so pinagkatiwala nyo. Si JD minsan, diba, iniiwan nyo. Tanong ko sa inyo, minsan ba may takot kayo na baka mamaya pingut-pingutin nung pinagkatiwalaan nyo, diba? Or duran yung pagkain, yung mga ganyang kadiri, diba? So the mere fact na meron kayong takot just goes to show that not every steward is a faithful steward. In the same way, yes, it's true that all of us are merely stewards of everything that we have, but it's equally true that there are bad stewards and there are faithful stewards, and we ought to be the latter. Ang gusto ho nating maging ay maging faithful steward. That's why ang pag-uusapan ho natin ngayon, ang title ng ating sermon is Faithful Stewardship. This is exactly the kind of stewardship that we want to develop, that we want to have. And when we're talking about faithful stewardship or biblical stewardship, according to Ron Blue, a Christian author, it can be defined as the continued achievement of God-given goals. So you see, pag pinag-uusapan natin yung stewardship, we're not just talking about any goals. We're not talking about personal goals. We're talking about the goals that came from God. And so, there is no way that you can be a faithful steward unless sure ka na kung ano ang gustong ipagawa ng Panginoon sa'yo. Alright? Kapag klaro na sa'yo yun, then you are on your way to becoming a faithful steward. Of course, still no guarantee, but you are on your way. And then it says here, using God-given resources, not your own resources. Pwedeng ang gusto ng Panginoon sa'yo ngayon ay tapusin mong pag-aaral mo, and you think that you have what it takes because you are intelligent enough, but don't you forget that even your intelligence, even your diligence come from the Lord. These are your God-given resources. And how do you actually use them? You use them in a God-glorifying way. Alright? So this is biblical stewardship in a nutshell. But of course, it's not enough that we just subscribe to this without understanding ano ba ang ginagawa, ano ba ang normal na practice ng isang faithful steward. So ito ang pag-uusapan natin. But before we go there, I just want to, if you are to understand stewardship, then you ought to understand it this way. That stewardship is not about being successful, it's about being faithful. Okay? Sino sa inyo dito ang mga faithful? Diba? Kahit o sa mga mag-aasawa, or sa mga mag-girlfriend, kahit ganong kagwapo, kahit ganong kaganda, kahit ganong kayaman, pag hindi ho faithful yan, hindi pa rin natin gusto yan. Tama, mali? Pero paano, Pastor, kung sobrang pogi talaga? Kahit sobrang pogi, pag hindi faithful, it doesn't really matter. Ganun din ho sa isang Kristiyano. For the Lord, it wouldn't really matter how successful you are. You can be the most successful in the world. But if you are not faithful, with the resources that He gives you, with the life that He has entrusted to you, with the family members, the money that He has entrusted to you, then none of your success will matter to the Lord. Why? Because stewardship is not about being successful. It is about what? It's about being faithful. And since we're talking about faithful stewardship, what we want to talk about this time from the parable of the talents is, ano ba yung mga apat na ginagawa? What are the 4 things or the 4 practices of a faithful steward? So you may want to evaluate yourselves and ask yourselves, ito ba yung ginagawa ko? Kasi kung 4 na to ginagawa mo, malamang you are a faithful steward. Alright? So we're gonna base it on the parable of the talents and we're gonna do it differently this time. Normally, I ask you to stand up para ho basahin natin ang buo. But this time around, babasahin ho natin ang dahan-dahan as we discuss every point of the 4 points. Alright? So what's the first practice? Ano ho yung unang madalas ginagawa ng isang faithful steward? A faithful steward is somebody who admits that God owns everything. So you want to be a faithful steward, this is the first thing that you do. You admit God's ownership. Admit God's ownership. Aminin mo na. Huwag mo nang i-deny, huwag mo nang ipaglaban na dahil ikaw ang nagpakahirap dyan, dahil ikaw ang nagtrabaho, sa'yo yan. When you think about it, even yung lakas na kinakailangan mo para makaipon, makapagtrabaho, yung talino na ginagamit mo para magkaroon ng pera, ma-honor sa school, even these things ay nanggaling sa Panginoon. So stop making yourself believe that you own these things because you don't own anything. In fact, the first step to being a faithful steward is to admit God's ownership. Now, let's talk about the story. So beginning with verse 14. Pwede ho bang basahin ng lahat ng mga faithful stewards sa lugar na ito on the count of 3? Let's read. It's very clear na ang pinag-uusapan ho natin dito is not the property of the servants. Pinagkatiwala sa kanila, binigay sa kanila nung time na yon. But it doesn't mean that it's theirs because it's very clear here, I even circled it, that it is the master's property. It is the man's property. So, kinailangan niya lang umalis. He had to go on a journey. Before he went on a journey, tinawag niya ho yung kanyang mga servants, para i-entrust, para ipagkatiwala sa kanila ang kanyang property. So, it is very clear. Now, when we talk about admitting God's ownership, Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." So unless you have any plans of migrating to Mars or Jupiter or Pluto, which is no longer a planet, for as long as you're living in this world, then I tell you, everything that you have belongs to the Lord. There is nothing in you, nothing about you, that you can say does not belong to the Lord. Everything belongs to the Lord. In fact, last night, nagtanong ako sa AI, sa ChatGPT, sabi ko, meron bang kahit isang bagay sa mundo na hindi gawa mula sa nature or mula sa mga natural elements na matatagpuan sa, periodic table? So sabi, there's none. Zero. Kahit daw yung mga synthetic, kahit daw yung mga plastic or whatever, lahat ho yan, ang raw material ho niya nanggagaling sa nature. Okay? So doon na lang doon niya na lang tignan In the same way, lahat ng meron tayo, it belongs to the Lord. The money that you have in your pocket, it's not yours. Yes, ikaw ang kumita niyan, pero sino nagbigay sa'yo ng lakas para kumita? Sino nagbigay sa'yo ng opportunity para kumita? Let's not even talk about the opportunity. Sino ang nagbigay sa'yo ng buhay ngayon kaya kaya mong kumita? Kaya mo bang kumita kung wala kang buhay? Of course, it's impossible. You see? So everything belongs to the Lord. And this is the first thing. It might sound very basic, but unless you admit, and kaya nga ho admit kasi hindi ganun kadali. 'Di ba? Yung mga bagay na inaamin natin, kaya natin inaamin kasi mahirap po siyang sabihin, mahirap po siyang ipamuhay. And ang katotohanan, mahirap naman talagang sabihin at ideklara na lahat ng meron ako sa Diyos pala. All right? But that is the truth, and that is the first step to faithful stewardship. All right? So, we're saying that stewardship is not about being successful, it's about being faithful. Then you better admit that God owns everything you have. And that is just the first. Now, the second practice is trust God's economics. So, kanina pinag-uusapan natin, you admit that God owns everything. And hindi naman madaling paniwalaan yun because yun ang katotohanan. Yung buhay natin ngayon, meron tayo, pero hindi mo alam hanggang kailan pinapahiram sa atin yung buhay natin. You see? Pwedeng malakas ka ngayon, but even your strength comes from the Lord. In fact, you don't know when that strength is going to be taken away from you. Sino sa inyo dito yung mahilig magkwento nung kabataan ko? Siyempre, wala naman yatang matanda dito. Pero naririnig ko yun sa mga matatanda. Nung kabataan ko, kung nakita nyo lang, grabe, ang lakas ko mag-basketball. Pero ngayon, di ba, parang ugod-ugod na yung tao. Because even the strength can be taken away from you. And that is a stark reminder that even your strength comes from the Lord. Your breath comes from the Lord. Okay? So, now that you've admitted that God owns everything, the next thing na kailangang gawin nyo bilang isang faithful steward is to trust God's economics. Pagtiwalaan ang ekonomiya ng Diyos. Sino dito ang may background sa economics? Nakakaintindi kahit paano. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng ekonomiya? Economics. Ayan. Diba? Isa sa mga aspeto or facets ng economics is distribution. Diba? Pag-distribute ng goods. In fact, kung ikaw ay isang economic advisor, dapat magaling kang mag-advise kung paano ba i-distribute, gaano kadami, saan, gaano kadalas, and so on and so forth. That's what you call economics. At least that's a part of it. Okay? And tayo bilang mga faithful steward, dapat pagtiwalaan natin na alam ng Diyos ang ginagawa niya in terms of distributing the resources. Let's take a look at the story again. Let's pick up where we left off. Verse 15. Pakibasa ko ng lahat ng mga girls. Read. All right. So, can we make sure that this is being, we're alive, right? Oh, somebody please monitor, ha? Okay, so, kanina, umalis yung lalaki, tapos nag-entrust na siya ng mga talents. Okay? By the way, ano ba yung talent na to? Ito ba yung talent ng singing? Ito ba yung talent ng, yung kumakain ng apoy, ng hindi nasasaktan? So later, I'm going to define to you ano yung ibig sabihin ng talent. Alright? But in the meantime, I first want to make sure that we are live. Are we? Okay, somebody's monitoring? Good. So sabi dito sa verse 15, dun sa isa, binigyan niya ng 5 na talents. Alright? Dun sa pangalawa, ilan yung binigay niya? 2. Doon sa isa pa, sa panghuli, ilan ang binigay niya? And then, he went away. He did not even explain, right? Okay? He went away. Now, question. Kung ikaw yung nakatanggap ng isa, tapos nakita mo, merong ibang nakatanggap ng 2, may nakatanggap ng 5, how would you feel? Be honest with me. Magsiselos. Diba? Or you're even gonna say, lines such as, parang ano ba naman buhay ito? Parang, ba't naman ganito lang? Hindi ba? So, bakit naman siya? Ang galing-galing niyang kumanta. Of course, the talent here does not mean, singing and all these other talents. Now, before we go on, pag-usapan muna natin, ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng talento na to? Okay? So, talents. Let's talk about talents. In the ancient Roman Empire, a talent was the largest amount of money. It was equivalent to around 6,000 denarii. Okay? Now, what you see on your screen is 1 denarius. At ang equivalent daw ho ng isang denarius ay ang daily wage. Okay? Now, in the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken, we're already at a 600 daily rate. That's the minimum, if I'm not mistaken. Now, just so you have an idea kung ano ang halaga ng isang talento, okay, na kanina yung sinasabi niyong malulungkot kayo, magjejealous kayo dahil ito lang ibinigay sa inyo, try multiplying 600 by 6,000 and you have an idea how much this would have cost in today's money, at least in the Philippine setting. So, 600 times 6,000. Cannot be? Okay, syntax error, ano ba? Okay, borrow 1 cannot be, okay. So ano? Basta malaki. Basta mataas. No, it's 3.5 million. Actually, it's around 3.6, pero i-round off na lang natin, 3.5 million in pesos. Kung sakaling Pilipino yan, kaso hindi Pilipino yan. Siyempre, foreign currency pa yan. Now, let me ask you, yung mga kaninang nagsabi na magsiselos, malulungkot, mababad trip kasi binigyan lang sila ng isa, yung iba binigyan ng mas marami. Sino dito yung mababad trip kapag binigyan siya ng 3.5 million pesos? Ha? Meron ba mababad trip dito? Wala. Baka nga hindi pa tayo nagkaroon nun tapos mababad trip ka. In fact, the reality here is that yung mga servants na to, yung 3 servants, wala ho silang karapatan, wala silang kakayahan, wala ho silang karanasan na magkaroon ng even, an amount that was close to 3.5 million pesos or 1 talent. So you see, the first time that you see the story, it's as if parang ang barat naman itong master na to, bakit isang talent lang yung binigay? Now, that's not the case anymore because we realize that a talent would have been equivalent to 3.5 million pesos if these servants were a Filipino. So, maliit, malaki. Malaki. Diba? At hindi siya yung tipong, bad trip naman, ba't binigyan ako ng 3.5 million pesos lang? Who cares if the master gave 7 million or 10 million? For as long as I have 3.5 million, then I'm good. Especially kung pinanggalingan mo ay 0 lang. Naalala ko, kahapon, kasama namin si Kim Liit sa party. Pero alam ko naman na si Kim is very good and is very mature. Pero ganito yung mga bata So, nung palabas na kami, si Kim medyo malungkot. So, tinanong ko si Ate Ayna, ba't malungkot yung isang alaga natin? Kasi daw, nawala yung pana niya. Tama ba, Kim? Nawala yung pana. Napanalunan nila yun Doon sa mga games, ganyan, doon sa birthday party na pinuntahan namin. So, naalala ko, magsasermon ako, feeling ko kaya kong itama si Kim. So, sabi ko, Kim, di ba nung dumating naman tayo dito, wala naman tayong kahit anong dalang toy Tapos na-realize niya, so kahit mawala yung isa, tingnan mo, meron ka pang 6, meron ka pang 7. So we still have, and it's $1, so we still have reasons, or a reason at least to be happy. And ganun din naman sa atin. Ba't ka magre-reklamo na binigyan ka ng 3.5 million, kahapon lang, meron kang 0, meron kang 20. So what's your problem? You see? Now, merong dahilan ng Panginoon. Of course, pwede nyo sabihin, pero hindi pa rin 10 million, pero hindi pa rin 20 million. Bakit sila ganito? Bakit sila may SM? Bakit sila meron DV Mart? Ako ganito lang. You see? So, if you're asking that question, here, I think you can find the answer somehow. Sabi ho dito, to one he gave talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each, anong sabi? According to his ability. Kapag nagbigay ang Panginoon, and you better trust the Lord's distribution system. You better trust the Lord's economics. He's not gonna give you something or anything more than you can manage. Okay? You don't have any idea. Let's talk about money. Marami sa atin dito na nagdadasal na, Panginoon, sana tumama ako sa loto, manalo ako kahit 1 million man lang, masaya na ako doon, o kaya makapulot ako, o kaya may mayaman pala akong tatay, na aamin na siya yung tatay ko, tapos meron ako 1 million. So, minsan diba, iniisip natin, nagde-daydream tayo, gusto natin 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, and so, now, some of you are probably wondering, Lord, bakit hanggang ngayon, hindi ko pa alam ang itsura ng 1 million, ba't hindi ako makahawak, ganito, ganyan. Chances are, if only you're gonna be sensitive enough to your ability and to the Lord's economics, then you're going to realize that you are not really somebody who can manage 1 million pesos. Why? 1,000 nga lang, hindi mo alam paano mo gagastusin eh. Kumita ka nga lang ng 20 mil, parang nanginginig ka na nangangati yung mga kamay mo, sa ko ba ito gagastusin, sa ko ito itatapon, 1 million pa kaya. You see? Or meron nga mga magkakapatid, ang paghahatian na lang naman na 50,000, kulang na lang, magdimandahan. Paano kung may 1 million pa kayo? Baka magpatayan na kayo. So you see, the Lord knows exactly how much He's gonna give you. Even when it comes to opportunities, even when it comes to your ministry here. Some of you are probably complaining, kasi naman, ang ministry ko lang, ako lang nagbubukas ng pinto. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially, baka ang sinasabi ng Panginoon, pag-practicean mo muna yan. Magbukas ka lang na magbukas. Pag medyo lumakas na yung bisig mo, magiging fighter na kita. Of course, that's a joke. But, my point is, minsan nagrereklamo tayo, hindi, gusto ko talaga, ako na agad yung pastor. Tindi ah. Kaka-attend pa lang, gusto na siya agad yung pastor. You don't have any idea how hard it is. You see? So, the thing is, ano man yung meron ka ngayon, binigay ng Diyos yan dahil iyan yung kaya mong i-handle ngayon. Hindi ba kayo nagtataka? Bakit yung iba sa atin hindi binayayaan ng ganda? Hindi binayayaan ng kapugian? Kasi alam ng Diyos, hindi mo kayang i-handle. Siguro sabi ng Lord, hindi ka na nga pogi, ang yabang-yabang mo na eh. Hindi ka na nga maganda, napaka-isnabera mo na, paano pa kung maganda ka? Abay, problema yan. You see? So, the Lord gives according to your ability. And when you know that, you better trust His economics. Not your economics. Kasi madalas gusto natin, ganito, ganyan. Pero alam ng Diyos kung anong ginagawa niya. Alam ng Diyos kung bakit may anak ka ngayon, kung bakit wala kang anak ngayon. Alam ng Diyos kung bakit may sariling pamilya ka ngayon, wala. Alam ng Diyos kung bakit ganyan lang ang sweldo mo. Alam ng Diyos kung bakit yan ang posisyon mo sa buhay ngayon. He gives according to your ability to manage. In fact, did you know that the talent that I just defined to you earlier was technically a measurement of weight? Alright? So parang ang sukatan nun, kunyari, pag umabot ng 35 kilograms yung gold or yung silver, meron na silang equivalent amount. So if it's silver, let's say it's 3.5 million. If it's gold, let's say it's 7 million. For example, binabase lang nila dun sa weight. Ito, katuwaan lamang, baka siguro yung binigyan ng isang talent na 35 kilograms, siguro naman papayat-payat siguro yun, di ba? Tapos naghahangad pa ng, gusto ko, mas madami. Yan nga lang, hirap na hirap ka ng buhatin, tapos gusto mo pa mas malaki. Of course, I'm taking it too literally, but my point is, there is a reason why the word that was used in parable had something to do with weight. Merong kinalaman sa bigat. Diba? Kasi hindi lahat ay kaya nating buhatin. Even sa gym, when you hit the gym, hindi ka pa pwedeng magmalaki doon, nakakapasok mo pa lang, gusto mo na mag 100 kilos. Tapos ang weight ng katawan mo, 50 kilos, gusto mo bumuhat ng 100 kilos. So you see, the Lord loves us so much that He's not gonna give us anything more than we can manage. Alam nyo, yung mga hinihiling natin sa Diyos na hindi binibigay ng Diyos, sometimes it's a sign that the Lord loves you and cares about you. Especially kung yung mga bagay na to, alam ng Diyos na dahil hindi mo kayang i-manage, kapag nagkaroon ka nitong amount na to, kapag nagkaroon ka ng ganitong relasyon ngayon, ng ganitong posisyon ngayon, masisira pala yung buhay mo kasi hindi mo kaya. That is how much the Lord loves you. But sometimes, if we don't know Him well enough, if we don't trust Him well enough, we get disappointed. But the truth is, It's about trusting the Lord's economics because stewardship is not about being successful. It's about what again? It's about being faithful. So unti-unti na ba kayong nagiging faithful? Tingnan nyo nga yung mukha ng mga katabi nyo. Mukha na bang faithful yan? Okay? Or mukhang hindi papahuli ng buhay? Okay? So it is about faithfulness. It's never about success. So we're done with the first two steps. We're done with the first two activities. Now let's move on to the third. A faithful steward is also somebody who prepares for God's accounting. So inisa-isa na natin ang mga business subjects. Kanina meron tayong economics, ngayon meron tayong accounting, mamaya administration, management. Alright, hintayin nyo lang. So prepare for God's accounting. Paghandaan ho natin ang pagtutuos ng Diyos. In the story that we have, it says here in verse 19, now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. Bumalik ho siya at nakipagtuusan after a long time. You see, in the story, the man represents Jesus Christ, who ascended to heaven, all right, after he died and rose again 3 days thereafter. And we know for a fact that Jesus is going to come back. We don't know when. We don't know exactly when. We don't know how much longer it's going to take, but one thing is for sure, kung papaanong bumalik yung master in the story, Jesus Christ is going to come back. And when He does, you better be prepared for His accounting. Kung ano yung binigay niya sa iyo ngayon, hindi niya hahanapin kung ano yung hindi niya binigay. Hindi kanya questionin na, bakit hindi mo ginawa to, ganyan-ganyan. Dahil unang-una, kung hindi kanya binigyan ng resources para dyan, the Lord is never gonna blame you. Alright? But if you know in your heart of hearts that you could have what it took, for example, to make a difference in the world, to make a difference in your community, to make a difference in this church, and yet you did nothing at all, or even worse, you did something which was the opposite, na dapat sana ikaw yung makakatulong, dapat sana ikaw yung magiging helpful, ikaw pa yung nanira, ikaw pa yung nang destroy. I promise you and I tell you, there will come a time when the Lord, or when you, will actually go through some accounting with the Lord. So how faithful are you? How faithful are you? Verses 20 to 21. Pwede bang pakibasa ng lahat ng, sa atin na, lahat na tayo. Basahin po natin. Verses 20 to 21. 1, 2, 3. Let's read. Okay, the context of the parable has something to do about the end of times. All right. In fact, when you look at the chapter, this parable is preceded by the parable of the 10 virgins. At pag binasa niyo yun, may kinalaman yun sa sa eschatology, meaning sa katapusan ng mundo. And then pagkatapos ho nito, the chapter would be talking about the separation of the goats and the sheep. Okay? So still pertaining to the affairs of the last days. Alright? So, if we take that into account, then I think pwede nating i-assume na even this parable has something to do with the time when Jesus would already come back. Again, we don't know exactly when. But, hindi ho unreasonable na isipin that even as early as now, the Lord can actually look at how faithful we are, and depending on our level of faithfulness, sa kahit gaano kaunti ang meron tayo ngayon, dyan ibabase ng Panginoon kung how much more He's gonna give you. And it doesn't matter. Are we talking about money? Yes. Kung papaano mo minamanage ang 20,000 could be the basis of how much more the Lord can give you. Because if 20,000 pa lang, hindi ka na nagtatights, 20,000 pa lang, ang taas-taas na ng ere mo, why would the Lord give you 50,000? 50,000 pa lang, nagwawalwal ka na, party ka na ng party, paano pa pag 100,000 ka? Baka magturo ka na ng kung ano at mamatay ka na lang. Are you following me? Or, sa mga may ministry dito, the Lord is The accounting could be happening now. Kahit ang ministry mo ay magtiklop lang ng silya, pero syempre, paano mo titiklop yan? So magsalansa na lang. Titingnan ng Panginoon how faithful you are. Baka na mamaya sa utak mo, buhay ito, tapos dinadabog mo. Tapos aasahan mo na magiging pastor ka. Or kaya magiging praise and worship leader ka. Pag pinagbaback up ka, ayaw mo kasi gusto mo ikaw yung bumibirit. Huwag mo nang asahan na darating yun. Because ang sabi dito, you have been faithful over a little. It doesn't say you have been faithful over something grand. Therefore, I will. No. The Lord is going to look at how you manage. Okay? How you manage the little thing that you have now. Sa mga single dito, bago pa kayo mangarap na magkaroon ng sarili nyong asawa, magkaroon ng inyong sariling anak, tinitignan muna ng Diyos kung papaano nyo hinahandle ang sarili nyo ngayon. Kasi kung hindi mo kayang i-handle ang sarili mo ngayon, mandadamay ka pa ng iba, maninira ka pa ng buhay ng iba. Are you with me? O kunyari, sabi mong wala pa kayong anak ngayon, yung wala pa nga kayong anak, hindi nyo na alam ang gagawin nyo Tapos talagang, hindi, Lord, talagang gusto na namin magkaanak. The Lord knows exactly when He's going to give you a child. And He's going to look at how you manage things now that you don't have a child yet. Are you with me? Okay, so, and when the Lord looks at us, the Lord is not going to look at our level of success. He's going to look at how faithful we are. How faithful we are. And have I told you, na pag ang pinag-uusapan ho ay faithfulness, it doesn't matter whether nakapag-aral ka, hindi ka nakapag-aral, whether mataas ka sa trabaho, mababa ka sa trabaho, ano ang ministry mo, magkanong pera ang meron ka, sino ka man, you have the ability and you have the opportunity to be faithful. Does that make sense? It doesn't matter who you are. You can be a pastor, you can be somebody sitting there, you can be the president of a company. It doesn't matter. Faithfulness is something accessible to everybody, regardless of whatever factors. Wala tayong excuse. Pag success ang pinag-uusapan, pwede ka mag-excuse na sabi mong, kaya hindi ako successful kasi pinagtulungan ako ng mga katrabaho ko. But you can be faithful. Pag tulungan ka man, siraan ka man, you can remain faithful. Doesn't mean that you're going to be successful, but it doesn't matter to the Lord. What matters to the Lord is your faithfulness. Now, let's continue. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, verses 22 to 23, tayo na huling lahat. 1, 2, 3, read. You delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. You see, itong joy of your master na to, hindi ho ito naka-reserve pag bumalik lang ang Panginoong Jesus. Sa mga nagiging faithful, sa binibigay ng Panginoon sa kanya or sa kanila, you can experience this joy of the Master even in this lifetime. You see, when you are managing the resources that you have, let's say sa mga magulang dito, if you are very faithful in terms of how you take care of your children, okay? There is a way, there is a chance that you can enter into the joy of the Master even within this lifetime. Like you don't really have to wait until the end of times. You see, sa mga nagtatapat ho, nagtatites, by the way, tithing has nothing to do with your pastors. I know that in some churches, meron tayong mga naririnig na nagkakaroon ng korupsyon, ganito, ganyan. But we have a board here. We have a board here. And if anything, kaming mga pastor, ito ba namang mga mukha na to? Hindi. Siyempre, the point is, let's be practical about it. How can you run a church that has air condition, that uses electricity, tapos wala nagtatites? How can we go outside and, reach out to people, make disciples, magtatayo tayo ng church sa Vergon, laway lang? Hindi pa pwede yun, di ba? Let's be practical about it. You see? And on the 4th Sunday, ako ho yung magsasermon uli, mas pag-uusapan natin ang usapang pera. Because tingin natin yung usapang pera parang makamundo, ganito. But did you know that in the Bible, napakarami hong beses na binanggit yung pera? Napakaraming beses. Which is just another way of saying that every financial decision is a spiritual decision. And we're gonna talk more about that on the fourth Sunday. Ngayon, sinasabi ko lang, kailangan na maging faithful tayo regardless of the amount that we have. You know, if you want to enter into the joy of the Master, kung ayaw niyo yung nagkakasya lang ho kayo dun sa buhay na sakto lang, you know, yung tipong hindi mo alam anong mangyayari, ganito, ganyan, natatakot ka, then start being faithful over the little that you have. Tandaan niyo, sabi nga ng Milo, great things start from small beginnings. Diba? Na, 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 na. Oh, pwede ko pang sundan yun. That is the truth. Alright? 24 to 25. Pakibasa ko ng lahat ng lalaki. 1, 2, 3, read. Reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. Kung may imagine ko to, kunyari dinideliver to, may panunumbat pa yung, ito, saksak mo sa baga mo, yan, sa'yo na yan. Ingrata no? Kanina lang, pinag-uusapan natin, ang isang talent pala would have been equivalent to 3.5 million pesos. I don't know anybody in his right state of mind na manunumbat pa dahil pinahiram siya ng 3.5 million, from which he could have benefited, by the way. It's not as if the master would have gotten everything. I'm pretty sure that the master, being a just master, would have given them a portion. Pero ang pagkakilala nito ay mali. Ang sabi niya dito, kasi master, ang pagkakilala ko sa iyo, ganito kay. Salbahe ka, malupit ka, umaani ka ng hindi mo naman tinanim, kumikita ka ng hindi mo naman pinaghirapan. So natakot ako, ayan, binaong ko na lang. Ayan, saksak mo na sa baga mo. Sayong-sayo na yan. It was not a small amount that we're talking about. Yung mere fact na pinagkatiwalaan ng isang servant ng isang malaking halaga, you know, it just goes to show na meron hong pag-asa sa puso ng master or meron siyang paniniwala na you can make things happen. But this last servant, you know, refused to be faithful. Instead, nagpakulong ho siya dun sa maling paniniwala niya sa master. Now, there is a reason why I underlined the phrase, Master, I knew you. Mga estudyante kayo, ha? Ano yung verb na knew? Is it past tense or present tense? Past tense. Ano ang present tense ng knew? No. Very good, children. So, past tense to So, it's as if, sinasabi niya na kasi, Master, 20 years ago, ang pagkakaalam ko sa'yo, malupit ka 20 years ago. 20 years ago na lumipas, hindi mo man lang ni-review, hindi ka man lang nag-isip-isip, baka mali yung pagkakakilala mo. We were talking about a long journey here. Meaning, you know, this servant would have had several years of opportunity para makorek yung maling paniniwala niya sa master, and yet he did not do anything. He did not do anything. So, how many of you here, yung 10 years ago, ang pagkakakilala natin sa Panginoon, madamot? Lumipas na yung 10 years, nakaranas ka na ng kabutihan ng Diyos, nakakapagbasa ka na ng Bible, hanggang ngayon, madamot pa rin siya sa tingin mo. So, nahihirapan ka magtiwala sa Kanya, nahihirapan ka magtapat sa Kanya, and because of what you're doing, because of your refusal to be faithful, hindi mo nararanasan tuloy yung entering into the Master's joy. All because there was a wrong conception about the Master from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, pero pinaranas ka na niya ng kabutihan mo, hindi mo pa rin in-upgrade yung paniniwala mo sa Kanya. It's time that you wake up. It's time that you prepare for God's accounting. Because stewardship is not about being successful, it's about being faithful. And now we're down to our final and fourth activity. If you are a faithful steward, then you should be somebody who manage. So, di ba, nagsimula tayo, economics, naging accounting, ngayon management. Diba? Isa-isa na natin. Ano ba? Taxation na yung susunod. Sa fourth Sunday yan. So, manage God's resources well. Pamahalaan ng mabuti ang lahat ng bigay ng Diyos. This is the activity. This is what a faithful steward does. He manages the resources well. Not just manage the resources. Sino sa inyo dito yung nagtatrabaho tapos meron kayong manager na hindi magaling mag-manage? Yung feeling nyo mas magaling pa kayo. Aminin nyo na, wala naman dito yung manager nyo eh. Ako yung nakikita dito sa video eh. 'Di ba? Minsan may ganun eh, yung tipong, alam mo, yung manager na to, hindi ko alam paano na-promote. So, ibig sabihin ho nun, you can be a manager, but it doesn't mean that you're managing well. You see? There's no question that we are managers. In fact, manager is just another word for steward. It's one thing to be a manager, it's another thing to be a good and faithful manager. And if you are to be a faithful manager, you have to manage God's resources well. Let's go back to the story. Verses 26, 27 ho yung susunod na, mali ako doon, to 28. Sige, pagsabay-sabayan na ho natin. Let's read it faithfully on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, read. So, take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. Now, pag binasa ho natin ito, of course, it's not really talking about managing resources well. But it gives us the bad example. It gives us a bad example of management. Somebody who didn't take or who didn't make the most of the opportunity. Yung mga opportunities, mga resources na binibigay ng Diyos sa atin, marami ho dyan ay panandalian lamang. Did you know that? Okay? Sa mga nagnenegosyo, alam ng mga nagnenegosyo na hindi ho araw-araw Pasko. May mga times ho na madaming pumapasok, may mga times na wala. The question is, how well did you manage God's resources when the resources were available? Kasi pag nawala na yung resources na yan, at nagka-problema ka, hindi mo pa pwedeng sisihin ng Diyos because the Lord gave you an opportunity. You see? Nung kumikita ka pa ng malakas, hindi ka nag-save, hindi ka nag-invest, tapos ngayon na nag-resign ka, nag-retire ka, wala ka na ipon, sisisihin mo ang Diyos na, Lord, anong nangyari sa akin? You should have managed God's resources well. Now, we're not just talking about resources. Lahat ho ng pinagkatiwala sa atin, sa mga magulang dito, pinagkatiwalaan ho kayo ng inyong mga anak. Habang bata ang anak nyo, you manage them well. And tandaan nyo, because ang anak nyo do not belong to you, they belong to the Lord, how you manage them should be how the Lord would want you to manage them. So sa mga Kristiyano, hindi uuso yung, ako magulang, kung anong gusto kong pagawa sa anak ko, papagawa. Kung gusto kong sumayaw siya, sasayaw siya. Kung gusto kong tumalon siya, doesn't make sense. Even your children belong to the Lord. They don't belong to you. So kung papaano nyo siya papalakihin, you better pray to the Lord. You better ask the Lord, Lord, ano bang tamang approach ko dito sa anak ko na to? Ano ho ba yung dapat kong gawin sa kanya? Try doing that. Even how you spend your money, you know, when you realize that even your money is not yours, but it's a resource that comes from the Lord, be prayerful about it. Hindi yung porket may pera ka, kaya ko naman, afford ko naman 5,000 yung sapatos, meron akong 5,050, okay, bibiling ko yan. Naalala ko, parang merong conversation si Kim. Favorite ko si Kim ngayon, nandito. Saka ang anak ko. So meron yatang gusto si Lian na ipabili sa amin. Or hindi, si Kim yata yung may gustong bilhin. Ayan, kung naalala mo to, Kim. Merong gustong bilhin si Kim. Tapos sinabi ni Lian, alam mo naman yung anak ko, minsan pabida-bida. So sabi, no, Ate Kim, you have to pray to Jesus first before you even consider buying. And then I remember, ang sabi ni Kim, hindi, may pera na yata si mama niya. Parang may pera ang mama ko na ipambili. So, sabi ni Lian, but still you have to pray. And then kami ni Ate Aina, in-explain namin kay Kim, na iyon kasi yung turo namin sa anak namin, na kahit na may pera kaming pambili, lagi namin siyang tinuturuan, mag-pray ka muna anak sa Panginoon, you ask the Lord, you consult the Lord if it's okay that we buy it, and then, you know, after some time, we can buy it. So, hindi yung porket may pera, yung kating-katin na gustong manampal ng pera. Ito, bibiling ko yan. Hindi ho ganun. You have to consult the Lord. You have to be prayerful. You have to be wise because that is managing God's resources well. Otherwise, I tell you, there will come a time when that will be taken away from you. Now, I'm not saying that the Lord cannot restore it because the Lord is a God who restores. But the point is, habang nasa sayo pa yan, you better do your best to manage God's resources well because you don't know when that will be taken away from you. Whether it's your job, whether it's an opportunity to serve here, whether it's an opportunity to serve other people, hindi ho habang panahon malakas ka. That is a resource and you have to manage it well. Hindi habang buhay, kikita ka ng malaki. So habang kumikita ka ng malaki, you have to manage it well. You have to manage God's resources well. Why? Because stewardship is not about being successful, it's about being faithful. So as we close, I just want to give you a recap. These are the things that you should do if you want to be a faithful steward. Number one, you admit that God owns everything. You admit God's ownership. Number two, you trust the Lord's economy or economics, the way He distributes, how, for how long, and so on and so forth. Number three, you better prepare for God's accounting because there will be an accounting, that's for sure. And lastly, manage God's resources well. It is my dream, mga kapatid, that we get to experience abundant life. You know, kung paano ito i-describe in John 10:10. Okay? But you can never enter into that kind of life unless you learn how to be faithful. Unless you become a good steward. And when we talk about being a good steward, I've said it several times and I'm going to say it for the last time, and this is where or how I'm going to close. Stewardship is not about being successful. It is about being faithful. So start being faithful and enter into the joy of your master. Maraming salamat ho and God bless you.